Could you accidentally start a new civilization? Imagine a passenger ship crossing the Pacific at night. The weather is bad, the navigation system is failing, and the captain changes course 3 degrees too early. It does not seem like a historic decision. No government falls, no border changes. The ship simply misses the channel and strikes a reef surrounding an island that does not appear on the map. By sunrise, the ship is gone. 73 people reach the shore. They have wet clothes, a few tools, emergency boxes, and whatever knowledge survived inside their heads. They expect aircraft within days. Then weeks pass, no one comes. At first, they are not building a new world. They are waiting to return to the old one. But the radio never works again. The food runs out. Children are born who have never seen a city. And rules created for one emergency slowly become the normal way of life. Without intending to, the survivors may have planted the first seed of a new civilization. The first problem is the word civilization. A group of frightened people around a fire is not one. A civilization is normally understood as a complex society with administration, shared communication, division of labor, and permanent settlements. So the survivors do not create one on the first day. They create a camp. And the camp begins with water. Food can wait. Buildings can wait. Arguments about leadership can wait. If the island has no reliable fresh water, the experiment may end before the first month is over. Then comes sanitation. Waste must stay away from drinking water. Injuries must be cleaned. Food must be protected from insects and rot. One storm destroying the storage hut could erase months of work. The survivors may have solar panels, medicine, batteries, and metal tools. But every modern object is now a countdown clock. A battery dies. A knife becomes smaller every time it is sharpened. Antibiotics disappear one dose at a time. The real question is not what they brought. It is what they can replace. This is where the scenario becomes uncomfortable. 73 survivors may sound like a large group, but population is not just a head count. Ages matter. Health matters. Family relationships matter. The number who can have children matters. Geneticists use the term effective population size because 50 living people do not always represent 50 independent family lines. If only a few produce most of the children, genetic diversity can fall quickly. There is no magic number that guarantees survival. Very small, isolated populations face rising risks from inbreeding, disease, accidents, and simple bad luck. Some conservation models place short-term effective population thresholds around 70, but a real human community would want far more for long-term security. A few dozen people might survive for generations. Hundreds would be safer. Thousands would make the future less dependent on one epidemic or failed harvest. But numbers alone would not save them. Pitcairn Island proves that. In 1790, a small group reached Pitcairn aboard the Bounty. It included 9 British mutineers, 6 Polynesian men, 12 Polynesian women, and an infant. They carried pigs, chickens, yams, sweet potatoes, tools, and supplies. The island was fertile, warm, remote, and uninhabited. Then the Bounty was burned so passing ships would not discover them. On paper, they had what our fictional survivors needed: land, water, crops, animals, tools. What they did not have was a fair and stable society. The Polynesian men were treated as servants rather than equals. Conflict grew into revolt, murder, revenge, alcoholism, and suicide. Within 10 years, John Adams was the only surviving British man from the original group, living with 10 Polynesian women and 23 children. And yet the community continued. The women preserved Polynesian cooking, tools, practical knowledge, and household traditions. Houses were built, gardens were cultivated, children were taught. Pitcairn shows that a tiny population can establish a lasting society. It also shows that fertile soil is not enough. A settlement can starve from bad land. It can also collapse from bad rules. Back on our imaginary island, the first rules would feel temporary. 1 cup of stored grain per adult. No fishing beyond the reef alone. Fresh water collected by one team and measured by another. Every tool returned before sunset. But temporary rules have a strange habit. If they work, people repeat them. If people repeat them long enough, children grow up believing this is simply how the world operates. The person controlling the food store becomes an official. The weekly meeting becomes a council. A list of births and deaths becomes a public record. The safest storm shelter becomes the center of the village. This is how institutions begin. Not necessarily with crowns or constitutions, but with repeated solutions to repeated problems. Once farming and fishing produce extra food, some people can stop gathering it all day. One becomes a builder, another becomes a healer. Someone teaches children, someone repairs nets. Surplus creates specialization. Specialization creates dependence. Dependence creates organization. An organization is one of the foundations of civilization. The survivors would face another problem that ancient settlers did not. They come from a world where almost nobody understands the entire system keeping them alive. A doctor may know how to prescribe medicine but not manufacture it. An engineer may repair a motor but not refine fuel. A software developer may understand computers but have no way to make a circuit board. The group could arrive with more knowledge than any ancient village in history and still lose most of it within one generation. Knowledge survives only when it can be taught, practiced, and reproduced. If the only person who understands childbirth dies before training someone else, the knowledge narrows. If the best farmer never records which seeds survive the wet season, the next harvest begins from guesswork. If children spend every hour collecting food, they have no time to learn mathematics or navigation. Research on cultural evolution suggests that connectedness and repeated learning can matter as much as raw population size. A larger group does not automatically preserve every skill. What matters is whether knowledge moves and whether more than one person can perform each essential task. A civilization can lose a technology without deciding to abandon it. Sometimes the last person who knew simply dies. The environment would place hard limits on what the new society could become. Henderson Island, another remote island in the Pitcairn group, was colonized by Polynesians centuries ago and later abandoned. It has little fresh water and land poorly suited to agriculture. That difference matters. On a fertile volcanic island, the population might grow. On a dry coral island, even excellent farmers may reach a ceiling they cannot cross. Without food surplus, there is little specialization. Without specialization, there are fewer builders, teachers, navigators, or record keepers. But contact could change everything. If the settlers find nearby islands, establish trade, or receive new arrivals, new people would bring genes, skills, crops, stories, and tools. A village would become part of a network. And networks are where civilizations become difficult to stop. Could you accidentally start a new civilization? Yes, but not alone, not quickly, and probably not in the form you imagine. You would not step onto a beach, declare yourself king, and watch a city rise. You would build a shelter, someone else would find water, another person would save seeds. The group would argue about fairness, punishment, ownership, work, and leadership. The first generation would try to preserve the old world. The second would copy what remained. The third would begin changing it. Words would shift. Tools would be redesigned for local materials. Stories about the shipwreck would become family history, then public memory, and eventually legend. After several centuries, the descendants might speak a language the founders would struggle to understand. They might divide the year by storms rather than months. They might treat a rusted piece of the ship as sacred without knowing exactly what it once did. That is the part nobody plans. The accident creates the isolation. Survival creates the settlement. Time creates the civilization. Somewhere on that island, a child would learn the names of stars from a teacher who had never seen the countries those names came from. A council would debate water rights beneath the remains of an old radio tower. Farmers would plant crops descended from emergency seeds carried ashore generations earlier, and all of it would trace back to one navigation error in one storm. Not because anyone intended to found a civilization, because rescue never came. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe and leave a comment telling me the one skill you think every survivor would need.